everything. And so the Facebook live video tomorrow will go on. Brian has said if we send it to Great Falls, they'll post that video as well.
Okay, good.
So we're trying our best to
Yeah.
have it out there, and
Good.
so even though it has officially met,
goes
the
with
ball has been rolling with things that have to be done.
All right, the Sustainability Committee did meet. It was a very small group that did happen to get together, but we did have discussions. We had a presentation on, what's the ventilation? Displacement ventilation, which the state will fund, which is bringing the air in at the floor level as opposed to down from the ceiling, and then it cycles up. It's healthier and it improves the air quality. It's easier to heat things, so that that will definitely, I believe, be part of the design. We did talk more about different alternatives in energy consumption, and how we could perhaps get to either a net zero or net positive, and what we would do with either solar and how much that would take. We did come up with a number on the number of kilowatt hours that we thought a building of this size would take, and I think it was 1,300 plus, wasn't that? Around that. Yeah. And then that translated into a huge number of solar panels, and we wouldn't have access to enough space, land, mass to put all those on any site, and whether we would end up splitting the site, being able to get to, and whether even that would work in terms of it becoming a access to a utility. Those were really the two big points. Lisa was there. Was there anything else I missed? You had a nice report that I'm trying to bring up so I can.
We went over, we had a white, there was a request for a white paper on displacement ventilation and the benefits, the indoor air quality benefits of that. So there's a nice white paper included on that. I forget, I think it was a reduction in asthma. I can't remember the number,
right.
But it was pretty significant. And a couple other great statistics as well. We also went over the systems that we had the last time and just confirmed that those are the geothermal, the radiant floors, the displacement ventilation. We want to look at photovoltaics. Those are the systems we're going to continue to explore further. Jeff's putting together some numbers on that right now. And then we also talked about the other things that the group is sort of tasked with researching and coming up with ideas. So thinking about building systems, materials. So we're going to revisit the original list that we had sort of started the group with and prioritize which ones we want to talk about, and look at bringing in guest speakers. So bringing in folks to talk about digital displays or controls or whatever the topic might be that people are interested in.
Good. So the solar panels, I understand that we would need a whole city farm probably to have it, but what about putting them on top of the building and on top of the parking lot as a cover?
Those are all possibilities.
Yeah, we'll explore that, but it's a large number of panels, significantly more than what Geiger put in.
Okay, but maybe we could do
Partial.
partial.
Oh, yeah.
And do the gym or something.
Yeah, we'll look at all of that, no question about it. But it was interesting finally get a reasonable number on the kilowatt hours required,
right.
Felt would be required, and then what it was going to take to supply that. So that just gives us kind of a beginning point to jump off from and go from there.
Lisa's having a situation.
The other issue with the trying to elevate them above parking is that you're paying for a whole structure to support them too, so that becomes more costly than if we can find already existing, such as a large roof area to put them. So, but we
need the light show key. It usually shows up there, but it's not.
Because we're on light, you're on AirPlay right now. That's why.
Yeah, but it's not.
It needs to switch over.
Want me to tell them, light show?
great. So does any questions, I guess, on sustainability? Lisa, I think you still have a couple. We might circle back to it if there's any other points on the slide.
Yeah, we have a slide on it. There's a great
there you go, 2205.
can I ask a question while you're working on that? On the
Yeah, go.
geothermal, I'll be very careful how I say this at this point. Tomorrow I can say it a little more openly. But on the different sites that we have looked at, I'll be very general. Is it going to be possible to put, I mean, have you guys looked at that? At the multiple sites we have looked at, is it going to be possible to even think about geothermal?
Yeah, I think it is. It'll require a little more exploration. In fact, Frank, Frank right there. Frank may be the best person to answer that a little bit in
We
terms
can
of
talk about that down the line too. if that's
suitable
the case.
types of,
But it still is on the table.
Wonderful, awesome.
yeah. I mean, nowadays, it's, we're usually going with, like shallow wells and not the deep wells. And so, and you can put them in many locations, and whether it's, I mean, most of them go down through the rock layer, and so whether it's on a site that has shallow or deep ledge, it's still, we find suitability for them, so.
So we can use those vernal pools, right?
They ought to be good for something, right? And
Right.
so-
It was
Good,
interesting,
yeah.
for those that did not get on the Sanford tour, they had a wing, I don't know, it's just the wing, or a lot of it was, at least the part we went to, was dehumidifying. And that made it a lot cooler,
Absolutely.
take the humidity out of the air, and so that they were not air conditioning that. Was it just one wing?
Yes, it was just one wing.
It was just one wing they
Yeah.
were doing that way, so to reduce the power demand, electrical demand, but
was more the
was
inner-
noticeable.
the
Yeah,
inner
it was
part.
noticeable
Yeah.
difference,
Yes.
dehumidifying.
Yeah, it was. They also are on a 100-year flood plain, part of it is, and the vernal pools were dealt with favorably by the Army Corps of Engineers with them.
Right.
And they built on a sand pit, in a pit.
Right. All interesting points. And it required finding some land for mitigation for the vernal pools, as well as, I think they had significant site development costs for that site at the Sanford location, so.
I think they had a very benevolent business that helped a lot.
And we'll get into a little bit more on some of the other things that we saw at some of our tours a little later in the show when that's up and running, so.
Can, you know that sheet that we started off with and it told, it was red, yellow, and
Step.
the steps, the state
Yes,
steps?
Yeah,
This was very helpful, this whole essay on where we've been. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. It was very helpful on it. And I thought, oh, it would be interesting to
Yeah.
see it on that scale, what we've done.
We'll bring it to the next meeting.
absolutely. It's a great point. Great point.
We got through all our technical difficulties.
There we go.
Quick.
Good. So we're gonna move to the sustainability,
All right,
see if there's anything
so
else.
we've covered most of it, but Michelle helped take all the ideas of the group and craft this wonderful sort of vision/goal statement to really help us check in against as we're going along in this group and telling the story of sustainability for Edward Little High School. I think everyone can see it up there, so I'm not going to read it, but there's some just it really kind of, it captures it all at a high level, and the one thing that Tom reminded us is we want to keep figuring out what story it is we're trying to tell, and then use that story to kind of create bullet points below each of these items. And I think that's really great, because both as we develop it, but also as we inform the community, it's really great if we can tie it all together with a story as to how we're being good stewards to the environment and creating great sustainable environments for the kids.
Do you want me to update on fundraising?
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's not on here as a subcommittee, but we start, I know the mic is off, whoa.
You're loud.
Well, I'm loud.
You are
Okay,
live.
no comment. So I did I set up a meeting with Peter Creighton and Jason Lebec Mayor Levesque and Tom Kendall and myself with Barbara Trafton and Chip Morrison to pick their brains on fundraiser, where, how to start, what to do, and so forth, because they've been highly involved in fundraising in the community. And so they were very informative about how to get started, the story, you know, talking about the story, talking about perhaps the slogan. Now let's go down. And, you know, that we have to really be thoughtful, because once we start asking, we want to make sure we're asking the right amounts to the identified people or groups, so that we don't miss the boat by just putting a general, well, we're asking, and well, oh, well, here's my $100. You didn't ask me if I would do 5,000, whatever. So really being thoughtful around how we're going to organize it. So the first step we're doing this summer is creating a database, because that was number one, is a database with all identified possible donors, and really looking at who has donated in the community for different events and different organizations. So looking at people who are philanthropists, because sometimes people have money, but that's not necessarily what they do with their money. They might do other things. So really looking at people who often are doing that, and then looking at foundations, things that we could be applying to. So I spoke to Lori St. Pierre today, who has agreed to do some of that work for us. And she has a lot of ties to the community, which is nice. So she can do some research, and the goal is to get 1,000 people or possibilities on a database this summer. And then we'll have to discuss who manages this. You know, is this going to be someone we get that is a consultant that tells us what to do? They won't do the work, but, you know, next step, you got to do this, next step. Or do we just get also, she suggested what she called kitchen advisory group and a kitchen cabinet. So you have the advisory group, which is people that you really want to have their name visible and attached to the project. People that have a lot of community influence, that are, one, donating to the project, and two, are willing to have their name attached through letterhead, willing to go to events. So you kind of say you're the advisory in that we call on you, we give you feedback, but you're not necessarily going to meetings. You're kind of that group that says we endorse this, we support this, and move forward. So identifying those folks. And then the kitchen cabinet is kind of the worker bees, you know, who's going, if we did calls, you know, who's going to organize the calling, what's the message that we're all saying, so forth. Then it might be an event. Well, we're going to have this big event. Who's going to run that big event? And they would get their folks, and then we meet regularly to do that. So the beginning stage, because we won't know how much we need or what we do with fundraising, and probably until the referendum, where we know more cost out of the things that the state is going to be funding and the local dollars that we need. And so, but this is prep work. The prep work. So it was really insightful, and they were more than willing to have their, you know, call them up and get more advice or sit in. So I thought that was, I want to thank them for their time on that. We also talked, we're going to have a bonding meeting with Bonder. What's his name again?
Joe Kutera.
Yeah, Joe Kutera, to kind of go over with the city manager and our finance director, Jill Eastman, to kind of talk about where is the city in bonding, because we will need bond dollars to this. So kind of prepping on how much are we going to need to bond locally, how much are we going to fundraise, and work in partnership. That was the big thing, is we all have to be in partnership. City council, school committee, the community, that we're doing this, we have a common goal, and once we know the dollar amount, we all know the common goal, and then we're working together to get there. So we're really being thoughtful on what's the first step, second step. So when we're ready to kick off, we'll have everything lined up.
It was an interesting point that both Chip and Barbara made, was you really only get one ask.
Right.
So you want to do it thoughtfully, you want to do it correctly. You can't go back to the well a second time. And so we're very aware of that, and we want to honor that advice as we ramp up our fundraising. We don't want to have it splintered. We don't want an ask for performing arts and then a separate ask for athletic fields, because you're not going to get it. And so they were very, very, they emphasized that you only get one time around. So you go for it and you do it well, and that's the way you go back. The other interesting point that we learned down at Sanford, which I'll share with the community as well as this building committee, was they had 10 million that they bonded locally for their school. So I know we have bounced around, well, what's going to cost to raise locally, and we've looked at that 10 million. We thought, well, it's going to be shared between the fundraising and city bonding. Sanford, the whole 10 million was bonded by the city for the local contribution. And then there was fundraising above and beyond that for about 3 million, I believe it was, somewhere in that area.
2 million.
Between 2 and
Over a few years.
there, that then supported additional features. So that was news to us, because we had thought it was a combination of the two that raised the 10. And it was good to get that feedback from them and their experience. And they had 87%, I think it was, approve the local funding, the
Yep.
referendum.
Yep.
So they did an excellent job selling it and promoting it. And I think we're going to see if we can learn from their experience and hopefully achieve the same interest in this community and support from this community. So that's where we are.
And Sanford is a, go ahead, Holly. No, go ahead.
Do you know, are we aware of other campaigns that are going on? I mean, I know the YM always has a big one in what
We talked with both Chip and Barbara about that issue, and they said there are always campaigns going on.
Yeah.
You cannot gear yours and looking at who else is doing this and then try and time yours. You know, if you try and time it to tomorrow, there's another campaign that starts up, and you just cannot. So you do yours on your schedule, and you just go with the flow, and you make that work. So there are always competing interests and desires. So you just.
But we'll be by ourselves, right? So we're not partnering with
No, with
anybody in the city or anything,
The high
right?
school will be the high school, you know, for what
And we'll
we're,
raise money for the high school and not for,
not for anything else.
Not for anything
The
else.
ask would be very specific to, you know, what we
project.
need, process of the high school, so.
Yeah. And Barbara said it took them 5 years to raise 3.2 million for the library.
So,
And
the,
it was her
yeah,
full-time job. She volunteered, and it took 5 years to raise the 3.2 million.
the interesting point that she also made was they were still collecting
Right.
on
Yes.
pledges over a long period of time. So your pledge, you know, $5,000, maybe $1,000 a year, not, you know, one give of, yeah, I got to come up with $5,000 to give today. No, you could take that and spread it over a number of years. So they collected money well after the campaign ended, because the pledges were spaced out over, I don't know if anything went beyond 5 years, but it may have. We didn't get information there. But that was again, good information, how you go about, how your ask is, and what you can hope for. So,
Tom, what about people that pledge, and they pledge the first year, and they pay their $1,000, and God forbid they die, or they just say, I don't want to do this anymore?
well,
How many, what's the
the
percentage? did
percentage
you
was
say?
quite low.
Was it low?
Yeah, it was
she
very
said it
low.
was very
She said it
low.
was very low on their loss of
Okay, good.
monies that were pledged that they didn't get.
Yeah.
It wasn't that they didn't have to encourage and contact and,
Right.
you know, and make that thing, but they very successfully said very few reneged or were not able to come through with their promised pledge. So, different. Yes, go ahead, Holly.
Or just about foundations, is that a separate, I mean, you'll have some other group that will be looking at foundations, or?
I'm guessing it would be part of the same group, but that would be an avenue that would be pursued, where you could raise money through foundations, and what, you know, what are they looking for a grant or whatever it would be.
Like Stephen King, Tabitha's foundation, they do a lot with libraries and so forth, so, you know, they would be obviously one that we would reach out to and see.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you've got a person who can,
We haven't identified that person yet, and that as we ramp up this fundraising effort, we will start identifying people, and whether we hire an individual to really direct us, or whether we feel we have that in-house, we'll make that decision as well as we move forward. So fundraising will be a huge part of this, and it'll be ongoing. We'll start it as we are now, thinking about it, trying to develop the tools that we need and the information that we need to launch this in a cohesive and interesting way that is timed with, as designs take place and decisions are made, that it keeps us in the news, so that the interest level, we can keep the interest level high and therefore attract participation. So that's the type of thing that'll be taking place.
So
I think that's
Yeah.
what
we've done some work.
Yeah, absolutely. So should we put this as a standing
Yeah, that
committee
would
on
be
our
really
list?
good.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
wonderful.
so. Yeah.
Just a couple of points. We did notice some fundraising in a couple of the schools that actually used features of the school or naming opportunities in the schools themselves as an opportunity for assistance on that. So that was an important thing. I think the other thing that was helpful in Sanford is that if you're fundraising, even if it was a $2 million, it shows a participation beyond simply going to ask for the bonding as a source. So I think it was a positive message in that regard. So good. Any questions beyond that? Okay, great. We have yep, we're gonna just quickly, I know, Bonnie, this is the,
We're gonna give you a dissertation on the schedule.
right, the long list here, but we'll try to hit the highlights. And so as we go down through the list, what has been accomplished since the last time that this group met is we had the second item, which is the meeting with the Department of Education to review the site. And so that took place on Thursday, June 19th. And so we'll share, obviously, the outcome of that in a little more detail in the executive session. We've also had completed our tours of schools, and so we've got the tours to share with you. And so those were Hamden, Mount Blue, and Sanford. So that's kind of it was actually, I think all three were well attended and learned a lot. And these were interesting because they were all state of Maine schools as opposed to ones in Massachusetts, and so you get to see some things a little differently. Two of them were career tech schools, and one was not. So also, as we kind of move down through on the ed specs, we distributed the first draft of the ed specs to the DOE in advance of our meeting, which was wonderful. So a lot of work by Shelley, Mogul, that went into that, as well as a lot of other participation by people in that effort. And so those, I believe, have been sent to everyone on this committee. And I'm sure you've all spent countless hours reading that material. Yeah, I hear all the positive nods. If anyone was was not able to print one out, we do have some copies. And so after the meeting, if you want to grab one, we brought a few. But but the next effort with that is that we're going to be sharing it with the school board, and they need to endorse it as part of this process. And so,
There's really
Peter,
two
yeah.
meetings. Go ahead.
I did read it.
Excellent. Good. Good.
Yeah, and I want to think about what I'm going to say here. I have a positive, optimistic attitude on life, generally speaking. But when I read this, I thought to myself, we spent so much time looking at locations, an enormous amount of time. And this is really important. And we should spend some time talking about this. Because I saw some things in this document that I think deserve some discussion by this group, not just the school committee or other groups in the community, like even the city council, but I think the school building committee. That was my observation. I don't know if anybody else besides Bonnie had a chance to read it, but this is really important.
I agree with Peter that it is very important on it, and I also noted that it has been worked on since a long time. Was it March 20? November 30th, the first prep meeting came on it of 2017 on it, so I think that we've been working on it. I think we're down the path. We are down the path of PBL. And that was obvious, I think, how our building is, our ed specs are structured, too, I thought. And I don't know if you are referring to what we have heard since March 14th at our meetings or not, that some people, there are 10 or 12 parents that have been very vocal, that they don't like PBL, and they don't like David Stevens being part of this because they think he is Nellie Mae and he's all this kind of stuff on it. But I noted that in this, to me, it was, okay, we are down this road, we're building our school so that it can be used for many facets of education. And right now, the facet of education and the focus of the schools that we've been visiting have all been PBL, performance-based learning on it. So that's, I noted that am I on the same page as you are or not?
Really,
Yeah,
I'm not
I was
even.
gonna say, the ed specs didn't speak
No.
much.
No, but it
Specifically
was
to
there.
that.
It was
there.
It was there, but I'm not really going there.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is we can build a great school in
Right.
terms of the structure with the Performing Arts Center, potential A, and so on and so forth. What happens inside that school is so important, and this really addresses what potentially happens inside that school.
Right.
That's why I think it's really important to take some time for this committee to review it, as well as the other groups that will in the next few weeks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here, I agree with you, and I read through it, and I see multi-generational here, but not multicultural. Not even just specific to the student body, but kind of multicultural and international vision. I think that's what we're talking about. This
Part of
really
it.
is such an important document, and it does lay out more than just the furniture and the learning, but this idea of looking outward and not just looking inward. And that was the theme that I saw us in here.
And there are a lot of positive things in the
Oh,
document.
yeah,
Yeah, sure.
I'm taking it.
Yeah.
And the way the schedule is right now is there is time to reflect on this and get feedback, and at our next meeting, even, you know, add additional things. The first meeting with the school committee is just to update them where we're at, say, here is the draft of the ed spec, and it's not until the following meeting are we asking for approval. So we still have a window of working together as a group to review it and comment and provide feedback and suggestions.
Did the state approve what has the state seen the
They have a
ed specs?
draft.
Yeah.
So same thing, it's an iterative process. They'll review it, they'll get back to us with comments. We haven't seen the comments yet. We'll go back to them with comments. Sometimes they'll come back again. So we pass this document back and forth. This is, I know it says draft 2, but it's, again, just a draft. So it's sort of the first time we've pulled it all together. We've made some modifications since the first time Shelley sent it to us, because we even saw a few areas that we wanted to help the school department make stronger case for some of the items that were in there.
And while the facilities group that we meet with from Department of Ed at the state is going to review it, and they've seen many of these, so they'll have the context of this compared with many others, but they largely rely on the document as coming from the school department as being really your roadmap for how you're delivering education and how the facilities support that. So I think in some ways we're not going to get much comment from them on sort of some of that aspect of it. What they are looking carefully at is how do they equitably support the spaces that support your educational program. So that's the sort of lens that they're looking at it from. I want to be careful too in understanding that with a consultant that has been assisting both Harriman and the school department on developing this, has been very clear about not being a proponent of any particular methodology, be it PBL. And when we use the word or the letters PBL, you could be careful. David often referred to project-based learning, not proficiency-based learning, and it's very, very different. And so I think we want to be understandably very careful about the sensitivity to those terms in today's current news cycles.
So I would say what Holly did, which is read through it and said, I would like to see more multicultural items. That's what we're looking for. Because remember, this isn't the curriculum for the new high school necessarily. This is a guide to support the building of the design. So a lot of it is when we were walking around tours talking a lot. That's what Lisa's saying. When she read through it, we talked a lot about, I'll give an example, a media center where you can do productions and so forth. So do we speak enough in the ed specs for a need for that? Like when you read Sanford's ed specs for a second gym, they had to make an argument that their programming would support a second gym. So it's through the lens of when you're designing a building, have you put enough information in your ed specs to support the design of your building? The other thing that we've heard is when we say integrated programming, the high school is doing pockets of integration, but if we lean towards designing that there's more integration, right? That it's not, here's the English wing, the science wing, the math wing, but we say, here's a cluster of English, a cluster of math, and they're tied to the CTE programming. We have 3 years to work with our staff to get them there. So what's nice is this is, staff created this with the idea that we know we're here and we're going to need to be here, and we have 3 years to be working as a staff to get there. So when you're looking through the lens, think about what the community, like you'll see the multi-generation, because we talked a lot about, we were making an argument for a box office and an argument to have a central location where the community can go into the building. So we have to show, well, why would you be doing that? Well, because we hope to have, people feel like it's their building too in a community. Well, then you have to have safety precautions in there. Where are you going to have the instruction going? So look through that. It's not necessarily saying this is how we're going to be teaching at EL necessarily, but this is the design that helps. And flexible came up a lot because we're writing this now. The building's not going to open for 5 years. And then there's, so we have to be forward thinking and flexible. So that's why you see flexible a lot, is we want this space to mold and not say it's outdated in 10 years. So it's good that you said that, because then that's important. Like, what would that influence with the building?
Right, and I
Yeah.
think, and I understand that, and it's a really great complete document for that, but
Yeah.
looking at page 19, which doesn't cover me, it talks about guiding principles.
Yes.
And if we presented that separate from this context, you would think, well, where's the guiding principle about
Right.
international or global understanding? So maybe it's a parallel story.
Yes.
And it can't wait in some ways, because this is the story, as Tom, you said, is so important.
Yeah.
What is that right off the bat? What's this inspiring story that we're going to tell? And aspirational story that we're going to tell that maybe includes build on some of this, so that it's included, but also looks like sort of out for this.
We want to make sure our whole community is represented. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was good.
Great, that's excellent. And so what we're going to do in our schedule is set up the next meeting as sort of a good opportunity to go through in some depth, because you're absolutely right that this is a foundational, important document. And so we'll work to coordinate folks from the school department that can help also with how this document was pulled together. So that's great. Good, so that...
So bring your comments to the next meeting.
Absolutely, everyone. Follow suit of those who've read it and
Feel free to send them ahead of time.
Yeah,
to-
that would be
if you
good
have
too.
questions or
Yeah.
want to know more about any of the stuff the meetings that we had leading up to this and what may have been discussed or any of that.
And our next meeting with the Department of Ed is scheduled for July 16th, and so we're going to be reviewing their comments at that time as well. So that'll give us an opportunity to sort of bring that feedback as well. So, and then as I think Lisa started to say, there's a two-part process to the discussion of this with the school committee, and one is to explain it to them, and then the second one is to actually have them vote on that. So.
And it's more than just the ed spec, it's a whole process, because.
You're going to be in workshop. It will be a workshop.
Yeah, workshop, the first date, is that right, of July?
25th.
25th,
You'll have a
yep.
workshop. I won't be there, but other people, Shelley will be there to explain the ed specs. Adam will be there, so there'll be people represented, but.
Great. And why it's, to the point of schedule and why it's important and where it falls in the context, again, it's once we have this approved, that helps support the list of spaces, and that's one of the steps we're just now starting to get into now that we have a site and we have the draft of the ed specs, and so that now translates into really what is it that the school is going to contain for spaces. So that's how that fits into the whole picture here.
You can't start designing until the ed specs are approved.
That's right.
Correct.
Yep. And that's why on page 2 of your outline, we have programming dates are subject to change and some to be determined, because we're all waiting for those steps to happen. So, so that next piece brings us into the site selection and design, and we are again at sort of a great point in terms of the process that we've now had a site that's been selected. We've reviewed it with the Department of Ed, and the next step for us is to put together the site application to the state, and so that's being worked on. Frank is diligently working on that. Took time out just to be here tonight, but otherwise, and so that is intended to be done in early August, and the schedule going forward is to have the subcommittee review it, and I'm trying to think, their meeting is in August 31st. And so we also need approval of that by the school committee, so that's tentatively set for August 22nd. And then the straw poll information meeting would be the week right now of September 3rd, so that's the week right after Labor Day, when things are crazy and getting back into gear after the summer. So
One of our suggestions for that was we have a school committee meeting that Wednesday, the 5th, right? Adam, I think you and I talked, on the 5th, and so we could have a straw vote before the meeting, have the straw vote from 6 to 7, and then go into school committee because it's school committee night. That was one of our suggestions, is go for the Wednesday, and then people would know, okay. So I don't know how soon you want that date out.
no, it's good to have a target, so we can then start to sharpen that as we get a little closer.
And again, we're
So what we'll do is we'll advertise or get word out that there's a community forum to discuss the site and to conduct the straw poll, and we'll have an information session that we share the information about the site itself, and then we'll allow for any discussion or questions, and then we actually conduct the actual question, which just asks, do you support building a school on this site? And that's the question that we ask for a show of hands, and we'll record that. That isn't necessarily binding. It's not that if it doesn't have a majority of hands in favor that somehow we can't move forward, but I think the state would ask us, why isn't there more community support for something like this? And so it's information that helps build the case, and that the state asks for that in terms of understanding the support for it. That we haven't, sometimes it's actually at the location, it could be where the site is, it could be in a forum in a school, or we want it large enough, because oftentimes we'll have it in a gymnasium or an auditorium, so that there's enough room for people to comfortably convene. So.
How many people does the state expect us to have?
There is no expectation on the number.
No,
so.
because I
Get
think
6.
Lewiston didn't have very many, right?
On the site, we had 70,
70.
70, that's quite a lot.
That is quite a
but
lot.
I've also had some that as few as 10
Okay.
that showed up.
Never know. Yeah.
It doesn't really make any difference.
It doesn't,
They just are looking for
an indication from the community of whether or not they support the site. And that's all you're asking. There's no discussion of cost, building design, or anything. It's just
Or even site design.
asking them, do they approve moving forward with this site? And that's it.
And is it a consensus or a
It's
majority?
simply just a vote. It doesn't,
Raise your hand and
Okay.
count them.
Report the numbers to them. And
yep,
Okay.
just a recording of the,
I think the one on Lewiston was 70 to nothing. You know, so it's very unusual for any of them to get voted down. But as Mark said, that even if it was voted down by the community, it doesn't mean the state board wouldn't necessarily approve it. So it's not, the straw poll is mandatory, but the outcome is non-binding.
Leonard?
And do you anticipate or encourage or discourage discussions about the alternative sites that we may have discussed?
Oh, no, yeah, we will share sort of a chronology of how we arrived at where we are as part of the presentation.
The
Yeah.
presentation we had on Lewiston, we had an overall map that had something like 17 sites highlighted. Then we narrowed it down to a handful and showed those, and then the final 2 contenders, and then the 1 site. So it was a chronological presentation of how we got to where we did.
I think it would be important to have that date set when you announce it tomorrow.
Huh,
We talked about that.
huh, all right.
I mean, if we don't want a
Sure.
school committee night because we think it's going to take too long, how long do they usually take?
Hour to an hour and a half.
Yeah,
You also want to make sure you schedule it so people can get to it. You don't want to schedule it too early in
Yeah.
the evening.
Right, right.
So usually,
yeah. 5:37 is the school board?
No, you did.
Oh, oh, the straw poll at that time, so,
But now I'm thinking that this space isn't big enough, we'll have to go somewhere else.
I think it
Yeah.
is.
It's
I
not
mean,
big
you
enough.
You could hold it at one of the, I think the one on Park Street School was at the middle school cafeteria, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest space that's the best space we have. Yeah.
I think we've got to spend some time on the school committee, too, first. They know very little about what's actually happening with this, and to get their votes, or their okay.
Well, I think you're just saying the straw vote will take place on this date if everything goes according.
But what I'm saying is that they have no idea. We have no idea.
No, I know, you're
on
going to get it in
none.
July.
yeah. I was-
Right, and
at
even,
those 2 meetings.
so,
And
if
August.
you're
August, yeah.
going to do a meeting and you're gonna do a workshop, it can't be just from 5:30 to 7. It's gotta be, in my opinion, it's got to be a workshop that is separate and dedicated to this issue.
Are you talking for the school committee?
Yes.
Yes, on your July meeting, that's the only thing you have.
That's the only thing we
That's
have?
it. You're
Okay,
approving positions, and then you're going right into workshop. Yeah, I planned it that way.
okay.
Yeah, and then Harriman's going to do all that work with you in July, and then if the committee and everything's ready for August 22nd is when you're approving it, so that in the first week in September, you do the straw vote. Because remember, you don't have a big window to June.
Right.
I mean, you know what I mean? The farther it goes out, the shorter we have to June, which is, I mean, you know, yeah. So, I mean, we could either pick that Tuesday, the second, well, it's off Labor Day week. This is Labor Day week, by
Right.
the way.
Yeah.
So it could be that Thursday.
And although we have 3 very wonderful representatives from the city council, at some point, they need to be brought into this workshop thing too.
Yeah.
So that they can understand what we're doing and what we have been doing with it. And I know that both of you, all 3 of you give good reports, but I think that they need to be able to ask their questions and go from there.
We haven't been able to report too much.
Right.
No, you're right.
Exactly.
Executive committee, executive.
I mean, maybe you can come to the July workshop.
Right.
I think that's an excellent idea from my perspective.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in what councilors have to say, but when you think about it, council's going to have to approve whatever bonding will be done at some point in time. So this is a very, very much a partnership.
Right.
So I would encourage that.
Well, what do you
involvement.
feel about that, Tom, inviting them to
Oh, I
the
would,
July 25th? Why don't you,
Yeah.
we'll put out July 25th, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. I know, I won't be. All right. Okay.
Is there a night that both of you could be here better than the July 25th?
I'm out, I am not here that week. That whole week, I'm out. That's my vacation week. And you have, I mean, everyone, this is vacation
Yeah.
nightmare.
Understand
Yeah.
that, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
With it, because it's information, you're going to be really
Right.
sharing information, getting queries perhaps and things, and we'll answer those, but I think we're fine.
okay,
Yes, it's going to be a lot of information.
That's what I figured, there's enough of you that are gonna be there
Right.
that you don't really
And
necessarily.
this won't be the only time we're in front of
Right.
everyone either. As we, now that we have more or soon we'll have more information that we can share, there'll be more opportunities to be in front of both groups and working together collaboratively, so.
I'll be at the Rotary this month, so once we make the announcement tomorrow, I can talk more at Rotary.
Right.
In the chamber.
Well, that's sort of where I think we're at, and the question is whether or not we tell everyone, look for something in early September, or we lock in and say it's going to be this day in September, either 5th or 6th, Wednesday or
What is that
Thursday, or...
The 6th. Do you want to lock in to September 6th?
How do people feel?
What?
perfect,
What?
perfect.
Oh, that's not good.
But we
All I could do is part his open house.
We can reschedule.
We're going to have school committee on the 5th, right?
Yeah.
What time is the open house, Scott?
Usually we go 5:30 to 7:30.
He can move that, though.
Yeah, if... Thursday.
I get Great Falls TV.
Well, they'll be at the meeting to televise, okay?
So are we September 5th then, or 6th, or whatever day?
Those are the two on the table right now. The 5th, which is the same night.
If we did it the 5th, it'd be the same night as the school committee. And I don't see why why wouldn't that work?
On,
I think that would work the best, actually.
Same night as school committee would be best.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
The school
I
committee
know
would
it's
be
televised, but can you not
outside of
hold a
this
school committee outside of this?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
you can.
And we can,
It would be nice to have, I think you might have people stay for the school committee
Right.
meeting
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
had it there.
Yeah.
And, it's all about community support.
And if Great Falls is covering it anyway, they just stay and
So,
keep with the school
we
committee.
could,
so-
we could have them videotape it.
That's right.
Okay,
so it will be September 5th.
5th.
September 5th.
Do we,
5:30 or 6?
I say 5:30 to 7 for the first one.
Yeah, I think we could do, I think at
Does that give
5:30
people
because you're
enough
going to start
Time to get to it?
presentation and stuff.
5:30 good for families, 5:30?
Sometimes it's tough for
That's my question.
working.
Right.
6, and then we'll just start
6.
school committee
Whenever
following
we'll-
it.
Yeah, well, following.
Whenever.
School committee would follow.
5:38, just, start voting right then and there.
No.
no, right.
There'll be a lot of
Exactly.
presentation
You're
stuff.
right, Milling, yes.
So I actually think 5:30 is a better start time. So everyone's gathering, 5:30 time frame. Once everybody's there and you realize that you've got stragglers coming in and you're done, you just get started.
Some school departments have done is identify the start time, but then also have a drop dead time. We are voting at this time.
Vote at 6:30.
People know that we need to be there by that time.
Oh, so 5:30, 6:30 could be the
I think
presentation.
if they want to vote,
And
they
then
need
6,
to be there.
Yeah, I think the problem is if we start at 5:30, you guys will be presenting, and people could miss, and then, oh, how can I vote if I didn't?
They'll
see
be
the
asking us
presentation?
questions when we get to
maybe I
that
don't
point.
want to see the presentation, I already know my vote. I don't want to sit through the presentation. No, but I'm serious. If I know I have to be there for 6:30 for the vote and I don't want to hear the presentation, I have the option.
About 5:45.
The presentation on Lewiston was advertised that the vote will occur at 7 o'clock.
Right,
So
We didn't stand for
people know
exactly.
exactly when the vote will be
Yeah.
held.
Do you need more than an hour for the presentation?
No, not really. It's more or less how many questions get asked. If there's very
Questions can
minimal
still be
questions,
asked
then.
Yeah, after, that's right.
We could also have people there at 5:30 for people that get there early and want to ask questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. With
So
a,
vote will be at 7, presentation at 6, doors open at 5:30.
very
Yeah,
good.
sounds good.
Excellent.
Okay. Doors open 5:30.
And you can have happy hour at 5.
Right.
Put that in the minutes.
Band at 7.
That's right.
Or 10.
Cash bar.
Yeah, right.
Garden Inn.
And if that's not enough, school committee to follow, so.
And we'll talk to Auburn Middle School about their cafeteria. So we need to email the principal that date we need. Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Good.
Very good. So then, the last item that we had on our schedule was the concept design, and then that, again, follows the programming steps, so that'll be in September, October. So, looking forward.
Before we move on too far, one thing that is in the ed specs that has been updated since the last time is the CTE programs, the satellite CTE programs that the school department is diligently working on alongside the ed spec being generated. And they're on this screen, but I guess you can read them. I don't know if you wanted to take a couple minutes and explain where you're at in the process.
So Jim Horn, Bill Webster, and myself, Jim Horn, Rob Callahan, Bill Webster. We talked about the CTE program, we went over it one more time, and Jim's here, so if I don't speak, correct me, Jim, if I don't get something right here. Okay. So what we did think is we don't have to be in a box that EL is the satellite for all new programs. Really, this is an opportunity for the Lewiston Regional Tech Center to look at all their programming plus the additional programming and then make sense to cluster programs according to the sites. So Rob went back and really looked at what we were looking at for programs. And so you can see that the green are the LRTC campus programs, and the red would be the Auburn campus. So Auburn campus would have the technology thread and public service thread. What you'll notice is education, nursing, culinary under the public service. Those are extensions of the Lewiston Regional Tech Center. So they will still have those programs, and then Auburn will have additional space for those programs because those are the highest asked for with students, the greatest wait list. So that's why we decided to do those extensions. So it's been laid out this way. I did see, I was at the superintendent's conference yesterday and sat in the CTE workshops kind of on purpose, like, hi, we're still here, and asked if our applications were coming in, and yes, they were, and being reviewed. So they were positive about seeing our applications coming in. So good work, Jim. Excellent. So as they look at those and then give feedback, Jim and Rob are looking to correct them. Jim has a deadline, and Rob has a deadline of July 15th to have them all in, correct? Well, I think Rob had said to himself, I'm going to shoot for July 15th, yeah. So, because even if they're extended programs, you know, extensions, they still have to do a full application for those. It's not like you can just say, well, take that and we're going to put it here. No, you have to do a whole program. So once those need to be accepted in order to be considered.
Can I ask two
Sure.
questions? First one's a simple one. What's the one above culinary DO?
Yeah, remember you and I talked about that, Lisa?
Diversified occupation.
Yes, diversified occupation, and it's really for special ed, high need students to really do some career skills development for them to learn life skills programming and have placements.
And then the second question, I feel like someone said at some point in the past that being that Lewiston hosts it, Lewiston gets the most number of students.
Correct.
To this. Okay, so that is correct. Does that mean Auburn students get the priority on the red ones? If it goes through and everything's approved?
Well, because we're the fiscal agent, I think that's going to have to be discussed on that at the advisory level.
Okay.
So the advisory decides what the percentage is based on the funding. So I don't want to say yes and then be wrong. I mean, I'm tempted to say yes
be
because,
determined.
right.
Okay.
But I would say to be determined.
Cool.
I mean, it's definitely going to give us more slots because there's more opportunities, so we're going to have more options.
Awesome.
That work with the other students that are out of district.
They would be bused, there would be 2 bus stops, the bus,
So they're Lewiston and Auburn students. Auburn have fewer seats right now. in
Yes.
LTC, but there are students that come from other communities.
yes.
What's their access?
We all get a proportion. So right now, Lewiston gets 50% of the seats, and then the rest of the seats are divided amongst us. So it's Poland, RSU 16, RSU 52, well, they're SAD 52, and Lisbon and Sabattis all go in. So the advisory know that this is going on. They've given a thumbs up to EL being a satellite, which is great. Then we're going to be working with the state on funding these programs because from what I understand, I have to look up a law. There was some legislation passed as part of the finance package around CTE, so we're going to have to look at that because the Sanford superintendent said he had to be really aggressive to try to get funding up front and also asking other school departments to pay their portion. Not always successful with that, so Sanford had to pay a lot of additional dollars, recognizing that they will also get the reimbursement. But you have to be willing to wait the 2 years. So they did put some funding in, and they're pushing hard at the state to expand CTE. So we're hoping that when we know the cost, that part of the application gives the cost, and so we'll be working with local businesses, the DOE around that cost, and then what are going to be local additional dollars for these programs. But the first step is to get them approved so that they can go, and you'll notice in the ed specs, these programs are noted so that when they're designing, they have space for the programming.
Yeah, and the state has been eager to understand where we are in that and how many, so as we get into the planning of the size of the building, that's taken into consideration.
And they've been very supportive
Yeah.
of this process.
Very
Absolutely.
supportive. Yeah, they've been working with us. They know we're anxious to be a satellite program, so.
Good. Any questions? I think, is that our sort of primary agenda before we get to the tours here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So with that, we're gonna, this is a gray day, probably not as gray as today, when we were touring Hamden.
You want to hit planking?
I mean, do you want me to go oh, yeah, all right. Hopefully it won't be too fast. Or too slow. Is it running?
Front entrance.
So this is at the front of the school.
Oh.
Oh, you just went to the
I
next
just
one.
trying to advance the slide only, but.
It did keep moving.
You want to go faster than this?
Their Mustang is sort of like our Edward Little statue.
That's the front office as you check in.
What are you doing here?
This was the circle, wasn't it, Katie, that came around?
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of the percent for
So this is the band space, obviously.
Our current band room is bigger than theirs. This was a little a practice space, a couple little practice rooms off, a black box auditorium that my group is like itching to have. A little construction space directly attached to the beautiful auditorium. I was like drooling when I walked in there.
700? What was the seating?
I forgot.
It was around that. There was one concern that we did hear, and that was there was some sightline issues on the mezzanine, but
Right.
other than that, you're right, beautiful auditorium. And I think they constructed the pit space after it was
Yeah, that's
started.
the kids' space. This is the cafeteria.
And then this was, again, similar to some of the other spaces where you actually walk right in. The cafeteria itself is not a separate space from how you circulate through the building. It was sort of a common hub that other spaces were accessed from, so.
They had a courtyard outside.
And do I remember correctly that in Hamden, the community bonded all of the local match? So there was no fundraising?
I don't know that.
It-
I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't, not like Sanford. I don't believe, Peter, that they had,
Suggesting that.
right.
Yeah.
Because in Sanford's case, then that's not what happened, right? They bonded 10 million and
10
then they
million,
raised
and
3 million,
then
and
they
so.
They
raised
raised
2 to
two,
3.
and they're in the process of raising two, and they're
Yeah.
still working on it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Custodian office was very nice.
You were geothermal.
I can remember what all this was, so I'm
Way
thinking
heat
you're just
pumps.
looking at it. Get a sense of
It was a very nice mechanical room.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, very
A
large.
lot of space.
Lot of space.
Clean.
Huge.
Yeah.
There's a culinary art space. Even though they're not CTE, they have a culinary, which is similar to EL. We have one too. They have an additional multipurpose space.
They said that was one of the most heavily used spaces by the community in the building, just used all the time, the multipurpose. That's where they hold dances and other outside functions come in and use it.
It had a rubberized floor, didn't it? Wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
We're looking at bathrooms, is that we liked them without the doors. We liked them so that they just curved in like you see in airports.
Yeah, and you could hear better, yeah.
Asked a lot about lockers.
This is art room, yeah. They don't use the lockers.
And lockers
Every
aren't
school we
going
went to,
away.
it was,
Right.
There were no lockers at Sanford.
right, that's the only school, yeah. It's art room.
All of us, yeah. Right, right.
The art rooms were very, very small.
Very small.
Yeah, they were very small.
Right.
And it was a very compact, one of the features, again, that we looked at in the floor plan is that it's a very compact floor plan. There were some spaces such as the art room that didn't actually have direct natural light coming into them. It was indirect through a large skylight and a glass wall. And they had 3 stories on the classroom wing, so that was, and a lot of internal kind of spaces. There was a whole cluster of offices and support spaces off of the library that, again, had no direct natural light other than through the skylight and directly through skylight.
They had a huge cafeteria that was in the hallway, and it expanded both sides of the hallway. But going
There
back
it is
to
right
that
there.
other picture that you just did,
Oh, yeah, on the mezzanine.
yes. And I'm
You have to
changing
wait.
subjects. The mezzanine had a lot of empty space to it that we, remember? But it was also the entrance to the balcony of the, on it.
Figure this out. There we go, almost there.
They had a,
It's gonna hit it now, I think.
they had the cafeteria, which was really good.
Yeah.
And then down the hall from it,
Right there.
they had, no, that was upstairs, wasn't it?
Yes, that's
Right.
upstairs.
Right. Then they had a culinary arts section that they did meetings and et cetera in, and, the
That's Mount
commi-
Blue.
Oh, that was Mount Blue.
Because this doesn't have a courtyard for students.
No,
to
that's
sit out.
right,
You
it
were
doesn't,
Mount Blue.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I felt like the media center
Yes.
there, it was beautiful, but it was like
Hidden.
in its own, like way off there.
This is
Over-
on the
over there
third
somewhere
floor.
is the
Exactly.
library, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not the half window in the library, that was Mount Blue.
Oh.
There it is. Yeah.
That's, yeah, this is
The
handy.
view was great.
Was it Hamden that the community paid to enlarge the science rooms? right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. So they had both classroom space and lab space.
which you can see here.
Right.
Yeah.
6 million local, 40 million state on this one, so.
And did they bond it all, or did they?
They did not mention any fundraising,
Okay.
separate private fundraising.
All bonded.
It was all bonded? So that's what they mean when they say local contributions, it's not just fundraising?
Correct.
Right, right.
Most schools don't necessarily have fundraising. Most projects have the state share and then the local share.
Okay.
If you do fundraising, it's on the
Okay, now
side.
you have the next one. You can do this.
State budget includes a column for other funding, so if you do have dedicated fundraising, that's where you would put it.
Okay.
And it becomes a part of the total cost.
Okay.
But it was interesting, there are a lot of public spaces that it wasn't very clear. You have this beautiful auditorium, and it wasn't even clear where to get our access to and from it. And you saw from the colors, there wasn't a lot of expressive color. There was sort of the tile work, but so it was interesting.
What's the student enrollment there?
It's 780 from 4 communities, so. All right.
Moving on to
Sanford is very much under construction.
And it's huge.
It is big.
Yes.
330,000 square feet. They have just over 1,000 regular, high school students, and I want to say 600 to 700
Yeah, that was.
regional tech
Right.
center students.
That's right. So, yeah. Much larger, and they truly integrated. They have, the wings are separated by a pathway, and so, and they integrated sort of their regular academic spaces with the career tech spaces.
They're gonna have a lot of glass.
Google stairs.
The stairs were a big thing in most of the schools that we visited. They had some kind of a stairwell or stairs that students could sit on.
They called theirs the Agora.
They're putting cubbies in some rooms
Very few.
and no
though.
lockers.
No lockers, few cubbies.
You can see there, that's the classroom section, then it goes in the CTE section. So the 2 floors of the classroom, then it goes into a CTE section. They do the same thing, but, you know, one. yeah,
There with no doors on the
entrance, but
bathrooms.
Then they go in this stage to the auditorium.
Stage, yeah.
They have a huge.
How many
Massive
seats are
stage.
they doing?
Ooh, I'm trying to think.
I want to say it's 800 to 1,000, somewhere in there.
That one does, yeah, does not have a
said
balcony.
850, I remember
Built for 850.
But they have an entrance to that area.
Right, to that area. Its own entrance.
Separate.
There's an auditorium and there's a
In
gymnasium.
the gym.
Had their own entrance. There's a gym floor going in. And we
Billy-
couldn't,
Billy was
we didn't
walking
get a
on that.
shot at the small gym because it wasn't,
The floor was being
we couldn't go
prepared.
on the floor. There it is. This is the view from where the gymnasium auditorium are. Classroom? You didn't have windows, you had a skylight.
They were going to use the Prometheus board, right? Smart board?
Yes, yeah, for technology, yeah.
That's a student lounge area, so it's all
One
glass.
in each wing,
Yeah.
one of those in each wing.
And what they did was they took some space from from the media center and distributed in the other areas. So. And sold that concept to the state.
They incorporated the alternative ed in the building, but it had its own entrance, and it was down at the end of one of the corridors, so they could stay fairly
Self-sustainable.
isolated, so to speak.
It was the same thing at Hamden too, but a much smaller alternative program.
Yeah, it was much smaller.
It was on Sanford?
They have a bank in here that they have, this is the one that has the bank.
Mount
that's-
Blue.
Mount Blue had a bank.
Yeah, so this is
Mount Blue had the bank,
Yeah, this
but
Mount-
they're looking for a bank.
Yes,
Yeah, they're looking
right.
for a
Sanford is
bank.
looking
That's
for a
right.
bank.
You're right.
Yeah, they had a,
They struggled with finding a town.
Right.
A lot of them want drive-throughs, unless you're early in the planning.
Oh, this was awesome. This is Mount Blue. This is donated auditorium.
one of the comments from one of our discussions with the state is that we've got to be, even though these were all state-funded, to be cognizant that, I'm trying to think how to put it diplomatically, they won't necessarily support all the same features that we're seeing in these schools at this point in time. So we just have to be really careful about.
And when they say they won't support, they won't apply state dollars.
Right.
You always have the option to do different things than when you apply local dollars to.
That whole media section was awesome that they had there.
This is their existing gym that was part of the renovation portion of the building, so this was a renovation addition project.
And the concession stand was across from the gym and down the hall from the auditorium.
Yeah, kind of kitty
Right.
corner to the black box, or little performing arts space.
That's the cafeteria.
They have a lecture hall in
Yeah, that
addition
was
to the
nice.
auditorium.
That was cool.
Yeah,
That was
that was
really
nice.
cool.
It was a nice space.
A lot.
They use
You could
it
do
for.
plays, you know,
I was gonna say, I could see a lot of like community, little like community events and that kind of thing would be perfect in there.
This is their food court, it has lots of different seating.
Cafeteria. This is what I was thinking of, this one.
And then you can close off sections of it with a garage door. Yeah.
It's cool. This is the restaurant, the Culinary Arts Restaurant, which was down the cafeteria.
They call it Main Street. Everything's off the main street.
They provided lunch for us. These are students that served us.
They sold these chairs.
the chairs.
Better food than the Massachusetts program I'm hearing, so.
Not that that was bad, it was just really good.
They had quite a bit of art, didn't they?
That's their tech space, I should put that.
That's,
Right.
that's in the inside.
The fire department, that was pretty awesome, and I think it was Billy that said the only thing that they were missing was the pole.
Adult ed is outside in there, that area.
There was a teacher lounge that they turned into a
Maker space. Metal fabrication. Composite.
They were making snowboards there, too.
Screen printing.
Oh, you'll like one picture very much. It's coming up. And what they're doing is the 3D printer is making parts to 3D printers.
Right? Oh, yeah, you can build one, make it self.
Yeah.
We're gonna take
So you can
over.
replicate
Right,
it.
exactly.
They're coming to get us.
You can replicate it.
Next on my avenue.
There's the auditorium.
Their
It's
auditorium.
Awesome. They have a big benefactor.
It's a little smaller.
Oh, I don't think so. It's gorgeous.
Seems like most of them, the band choir stuff
Put it near.
directed, connected directly.
Did they have much of a fly on the stage?
I didn't go to this one. I'm
How
not
much
sure.
what?
You know, the fly behind the stage to pull a whole scene up,
I
or
don't
is it
remember
limited?
that there was, I think Sanford was the biggest we saw.
Well,
And it
Sanford
still
did not
wasn't
have a
full.
full fly.
Didn't have a
yeah,
full fly.
Right.
None of them have a
Hamden,
full
I'm
fly.
pretty sure did.
Which one?
Hamden. had
Hamden
full
did?
stuff.
Yes,
I
yes.
didn't go on that one.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So those are the tours to give you a feel.
Awesome.
Good. Great. And I guess we just put in this slide to represent the fact that on the site selection,
We're
we're
finally
finally
getting
there.
to
So
step 7.
for everyone at home,
Everyone that remembers how long we said step 7 was gonna take.
Exactly.
This was updated October 21st, 2017. That's when we started step 7.
so, very good.
We made it.
Yeah.
Did.
Any comments before we move into the next portion of our meeting, which will still be an executive session, but this will probably be the last night for that to need to discuss the site. So, Very good. We'll take just a pause here and shift gears.